so we'll go ahead and start, and we'll wait for more people to hop on. And okay, well, today we are starting our family webinar series, and I want to thank first Nabrina for organizing this incredible feat in such a short period of time, transferring our family track into a webinar series that we were supposed to have in our international meeting. So I'm glad it all worked out, and I thank you so much for your help putting this together. And today we're going to be talking about some things that we all need as parents, the SYNGAP parents, and the sensory issues our kiddos have. So what I wanted to do now is introduce Leslie Ruthven, and she is one of Bridge the Gap's board members. She is the Director of Education for our organization, and she is our grant writer for our organization, and she has done so much. And I'm going to let you tell everyone that's on who you are, what you do, your experience, and what you're going to talk about today.
Awesome. Monica, thank you so much for the lovely introduction. I appreciate it. And I'm happy to be here today. I have been a board member with Bridge the Gap for the last 2 years, and I'm excited to be here. In my prior life, I was the manager of a program called Bridges at Texas Children's Hospital. It was a program for children with delays in communicating and relating. I truly, sincerely believe every child that came through that program had sensory processing issues, which is one of the reasons I felt and spoke with Monica how important it was to help parents understand what's going on when a child is having sensory processing challenges. So as for my presentation today, but a little bit about my background. I have been a teacher for the past 30 years. I've worked in many different capacities in public and private programs. And I love working with children and families. I'm also worked, as I said, at Texas Children's in the capacity as a manager, but I also had my own caseload of children and families that I worked extensively with during the program. I also worked in research administration and was a grant administrator, writer, and editor for Texas Children's and our academic partner, Baylor College of Medicine. So we work closely with them. So I would like to say before I start the presentation that I have 2 lovely boys who are now adults, and I really didn't know a lot about sensory processing disorders, challenges, differences until about 15 years ago when I started working primarily with children with delays in communicating and relating. And I received extensive training through Texas Children's, and I really worked with a lot of OTs and PTs and found it completely fascinating and such a large piece of the puzzle when looking at a whole child. And I really wish as a parent I had known this information when they were younger. But I think in working with children, whether it's at home or in the classroom, especially with so many of us having to homeschool our kids right now due to the pandemic, I think it's really important to have as many tools in our parent toolbox as we can. And so I hope the presentation today will be informative and help you with some strategies at home. And I will be happy to answer questions at the end. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and start. Okay, so we're going to start with creating a sensory diet. So what we're going to be talking about are sensory processing strategies for home and the classroom. Oh, let me see. For some reason it is not. There we go. I do want to note that I have no financial interest in the resources, products, or materials provided. This presentation is not intended to be a substitute or provide medical diagnosis, advice, or treatment. It's really intended to provide information about sensory processing challenges, differences, and the strategies that can be used. If you feel your child has a sensory processing disorder or needs to be seen by a professional, I really encourage you to consult your physician for medical advice, diagnosis, treatment, or referral to be evaluated and assessed by someone who is an expert. Usually occupational therapy or therapists are the ones that do sensory processing evaluations and assessments. I'll go ahead and start. First, we're going to talk a little bit about what is sensory processing. Sensory processing refers to the ability to take in information through our senses. So this could be through touch, the way when we are moving, what we taste, smell, through our vision, and through hearing. Okay, so everybody, including myself, has sensory processing differences. We have preferences. So, if I look at it, my preference is I really don't wear a lot of wool because I find it very itchy. So, or I don't like being in really loud venues. And so it really makes me a little nervous. So if you think about yourself, we all have preferences. And that's really not a problem in daily life. The challenge is when our preferences are so overwhelming that they become a blocking force that we can't function to the best of our ability within the world around us. And I think if you have a child diagnosed with SYNGAP1, autism, many other children with differences, you're going to see that they may have sensory processing challenges that are really preventing them from fully functioning to their ability in their environment. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about the types of sensory processing challenges that you'll see. What we have to the left, a picture of a lovely little boy who is very excited by the water coming out of the hose. But I use that picture really as a symbol of saying, okay, this is a child that might be overreactive. He is someone who is very excited no matter what. They're 0 to 60 seconds all the time. It doesn't take much for them to really just kind of go over the edge in terms of how they react to something. Then we have the lovely little girl in the middle who I will say is underreactive. So if we think about underreactivity, I think of someone or a child who might be a little more low tone, that is more of a couch potato, doesn't really react to a lot. Things that you would think normally that someone might be startled with, they just seem to go with the flow. And sometimes it's really easy, but we're going to talk a little bit about why we want to get to an optimal level in terms of our sensory processing. Then we have a child on the right who may be mixed reactivity. And that's the child that is a little bit more unpredictable, that at times they seem overreactive, other times underreactive. And it might be a little bit of a surprise depending on the situation, what you're going to see. Okay, so as a result, these are some of the things, I've observed through the years and with my own kids or, in the classroom and, working with a lot of families, PTs and OTs through the years. Resulting behaviors. If you have a child that is overwhelmed by what's going on in their environment, by their sensory processing challenges, you have the children that are the avoiders. They're the ones, they don't want to transition, they don't want to do anything new. If something might be difficult for them, rather than, you know, trying to tackle it, they're just going to avoid having to do it at all. They, you know, and we've all been there, Then we have the sensory seekers. I'm very familiar with this one. I had one child that was a definite sensory seeker. And this is the child that you'll see in the classroom that might be covered in paint, or that will go in the yard and roll in the mud and not even bother them. Nothing, you know, they're really seeking out, trying to get that sensation. They love it. You know, they love, you know, getting in the shower and feeling the water. They are looking into their environment and seeking out sensations. Then we have the mixed reactivity. So sometimes the seeker, sometimes avoidant. And so, you know, it just really depends. I thought these pictures were somewhat representative of those that will just, you know, go all out there and they're running and doing things. And, you know, it's not really necessarily a problem. It gets to be a problem when you can't get them to calm themselves to be able to attend to what's going on around them. And then avoidant, if you're avoiding what's going on in your environment, it's hard to interact with others. So sensory challenges can make it difficult to share attention and stay regulated, both emotionally and physically. So what I'm looking at is, you know, is a child able to be ready to be engaged, calm, and attentive to learn either at home or in the classroom, to listen, to stay engaged and form a relationship with those around them, to communicate in a successful manner, whether it's verbal or nonverbal, to engage in shared social problem solving, to figure out, the child really wants something, but, you know, maybe they need an adult or someone else to kind of help them figure out how to take care of that. And you need to be able to communicate. You need to be able to think about sequencing and how you're going to go about solving something. And then eventually you want them to be able to independently problem solve without the assistance of someone else. But sensory challenging and processing disorders can make it really difficult to achieve those steps. Okay, while been here, this is when you have a child that is completely dysregulated. The environment, it's too much, too loud, there's too much going on, and they've had it. Who hasn't been here? So we've all been down this road. And what we want to do is be available to a child to help support their sensory system and learn to adapt to their environment, because the last thing we want to see is like this little child here who clearly looks very, very unhappy. So what can we do? How can we help as parents and as teachers in a classroom? The first thing I would want to be doing is, you know, you need to address a child's sensory processing challenges. And this will help them learn to expand and improve their ability to regulate, to communicate successfully, stay engaged, be focused at home and in the classroom, engage in shared social problem solving, and learning to adapt to new environments and situations. So that can be difficult for the best of us. Okay, the key to developing a sensory diet. First, we're going to have a basic understanding of your child's sensory profile. The next steps we're going to go through fairly quickly, but I want to let you know that I am going to have resources at the end of the webinar that will be posted on Bridge the Gap's website that you can download, you can print for free, and use them to kind of assess what's going on with your child and just get a general sense, because sometimes you really need to stop and really think about exactly what's happening. So in this little guy, I'm going to guess is a sensory seeker because he's got his hands painted up and he looks pretty happy. So I'm going to go to the next. Okay, so the basic sensory assessment, we want to look at touch, proprioception, which is sense of where your body is in space, vestibular movement, auditory and listening, and taste and smell. So I'm going to give you some examples, and I just want you to think for a minute. You don't have to write anything down. You can think about yourself, think about your child, you know, because we really all have sensory differences and preferences. But what I want you to keep in mind when I'm going through this list is, am I or is my child, do they seek out these things? Do they avoid them? Are they mixed reactivity where sometimes they seek them out and sometimes they avoid them? Or are they completely neutral? You think that has no impact whatsoever and doesn't seem to be an issue. So we're going to talk a little bit about touch. And, you know, that is one of the major sensory components that you want to think about, is being touched on some body parts, hugs and cuddles. And are they seeking out a firm touch? Are they seeking out, you know, a light touch? What is their preference? Do certain pieces of clothing drive them crazy? And if you have a child that has sensory challenges, you will know. Getting hands, face, or other parts messy, you know, you think of the kids that get something on their hand and it just, they become unglued. They can't take it. Taking a bath, shower, swimming, toweling dry, trying new foods, you know, go through the whole list and just think about, is this something, where does my child, you know, go on that from, you know, it's an extreme sensory processing issue for them, or it's not a sensory processing issue at all. And then are they seeking or avoiding, or a little of both? Proprioception, sense of body. So proprioception includes activities such as, you know, the child who is roughhousing, jumping, banging, always banging, bouncing, climbing. They're really active. They would be the seeker. They're seeking out high risk, fine motor tasks, or they might enjoy or not enjoy. Activities requiring physical strength and force, you know, are they seeking those out or are they avoiding it? Seekers tend to be eating the crunchy foods that are dry, pretzels, or chewy. And then those that are more avoidant tend to be looking at just, they only want the creamy, smooth foods. They don't want anything crunchy. And are they trying to protect their sense of body by keeping their eyes closed or covered? Is there something, you know, in terms of where they are? The other thing I look at with proprioception is when you see a child go in and almost map the room and kind of really get an idea of where they are in the room, they're kind of mapping it. If you ever see a child going around, they're kind of seeking that touch along the walls and checking everything out. So vestibular for the sensory processing has to do with movement. And this wouldn't be involved in like someone who's swinging, riding an equipment, even a car, swings, whatever, spinning activities, if they are moving their head in a certain position, or, you know, are they okay with that? Do they like it? Do they not like it? Activities that challenge their ability to balance, such as skating or biking, that long list of things. Or do they like being up high or not being up high, like climbing, descending stairs, slides, and ladders? So those all involve your vestibular processing system. And so what you want to think about is, you know, is my child seeking that movement or are they avoiding it? And, you know, that will give you a clue in terms of the type of strategy that we're going to lay out that you want to use for them. Auditory, listening. So is this the child that hears every loud sound, horns, and is really alerted to that, or do they just don't seem to pay attention, watching TV or listening to music, being spoken to? Are they hearing what you're saying even if there's background noise going on? Do they like games or do they avoid games with verbal instructions? Is it overwhelming, or do they kind of seek it out? Back and forth, interactive conversations, how are they with that? And this is a real challenge with many children with delays in communicating and relating, is that even if you're just using gestures and very few words, that back and forth interactive active communicating can be really difficult. Are they seeking or avoiding familiar sounds, unfamiliar sounds, silly sounds? Do they enjoy singing alone or with others, or do they avoid it? Vision. This is a big one, especially for classrooms, or, you know, now that many are doing learning from home, is learning to read or reading for more than a few minutes may be difficult. Looking at different shiny, spinning or moving objects. Are they trying to do activities that require hand-eye coordination, or is that difficult? Visual analysis tasks like a puzzle or maze, activities that discriminate between shapes, colors, and sizes. These are all things that kids are taking in through their vision. We all do. But for some children, this might be overwhelming. It might be uncomfortable. And we really want to look at, are they avoiding doing some of these things because it is overwhelming, or are they seeking those out as a way to stimulate their sensory system? Taste and smell. Smelling unfamiliar scents, strong odors, smelling objects that aren't food. Are they always going around smelling things, or are they totally avoiding it? Do they enjoy new foods, or are they resistant? And eating familiar foods or eating strongly flavored foods, are they seeking out very spicy, salty, bitter, sour, or sweet, or are they avoiding them? Okay. So our next step is trying to identify and think about the situations where your child has the most difficulty with staying regulated physically and emotionally. What are the situations where you are almost guaranteed your child is going to be having a meltdown or really have a difficulty moving on to something else, where they have trouble communicating what they want or need, staying engaged with others, focusing on a task or problem solving. You know, I think about, you know, for all of us, it's so important, regulation. If you think about, you know, having a car accident as a driver, and you become very, you know, it's hard not to have that fight and flight response and, you know, get your heart rate going. And it just makes it more difficult when you're dysregulated to communicate, problem solve, stay engaged with whoever you're trying to talk to. So if you think about those situations and how your child might be feeling when they're having a challenge with their regulation. And does your child have a predictable pattern of behavior that you see? Getting up in the morning, meals, transitioning, classroom, stores, bath time, bedtime. You know, typically you can see when a child with sensory processing disorders, you might be able to see a pattern of behavior where certain times of the day seem to be really challenging for them. And so, you know, what I'm hoping we can do is, through the use of some of these strategies, that we can help them adapt to their environment, strengthen the areas where they're having challenges so that they can be more successful. And the other thing I want you to think in terms of your particular child is, what type of situation or what helps them calm down? Is it something familiar that they can hold on to? Is it movement, slow rocking movement? Is there anything that helps them calm? Do they need a quiet, calm environment? Do they need a squeeze with deep pressure or a weighted blanket? What are the things that they're seeking when they are upset? And that is also going to give you a clue to their sensory system. And think about you know, what their needs are to help calm them when they are dysregulated. So my number one goal today is we want a child who has the ability to co-regulate and self-regulate both emotionally and physically, to stay engaged, stay focused, communicate meaningfully, even if it's not verbally. And if they have that all together and their sensory system is working for them, they're then prepared to learn, problem solve, and be in a setting where they can pay attention and focus. And this applies to all people. We all learn better. We all are at our best self when we are emotionally and physically regulated. Okay, so one of the recommendations that I have, if we talk about a sensory diet, and what do I mean by a sensory diet? What I'm talking about is building in strategies throughout your child's day, whether at home or in the classroom, that provides breaks, sensory breaks throughout the day as it makes sense. Whether it's transitioning from an activity or something where you know that they might have a difficult time, or you can see that they're starting to dysregulate a little bit. Then what you want to do is take a sensory break, allow them to get the sensory input that they need to be able to regulate themselves and be available to learn. And we also, another thing that can help is giving verbal and visual cues prior to transitions. I always find transitions from one activity to another can be really, really difficult. So we'll talk a little bit about giving verbal and visual cues prior to transitions to really help a child understand that we are moving from one activity to the next and prepare them to do that. One of the ways, that I really like when working with children that may have delays in communicating or relating are to really get down in front of them at their level, whatever level they're at, and really don't try, I really try to avoid talking to them from across the room, because generally you just have a child, even their typical children, and I don't really know what typical is anymore, but they'll just ignore you, or they look like they never heard what you were saying. So if they're involved in something, get down at their level, using as few words as possible, using gestures, and letting them know, giving them a sense of, yes, Susie, we are going to be transitioning. We're going to stop. I know you're enjoying what you're doing right now, but it's going to be time to do A, B, or C. And this is what we're going to do. And I'm going to give you 5 minutes. And I'm going to come back in 5 minutes and we'll go ahead and do our thing. And so I think using as few words as possible, using gestures, and communicating in a positive manner is your best strategy yet. Also use lots of affect, because sometimes kids are missing our cues. But when affect, I'm talking about if you have a child that is getting really wound up, and they're going to go over the edge, use your affect to bring them down. So I would lower my voice, talk slowly, use gestures, let them know it's okay, and we're going to calm down and just be reassuring, even until they're calm enough to attend to what you're trying to communicate to them. The other thing you can do for, let's say, the couch potato who is laying there, does not want to get up and do anything, use your affect and, be peppy and happy and just like, oh, look, we get to do this next, and come on, let's go. And, so I used to call it with my staff overacting 101, or acting for people that aren't actors, that are poor actors, I don't know. But using your affect to really draw them into communicating and attending to what you're trying to communicate with them, and also letting them know that you are there and you're on their team. Okay, so let's build our sensory toolbox. We are going to go ahead and talk about strategies. So what I've done with this presentation is talk about getting the sensory system when we're doing sensory breaks moving. And that can help with the vestibular, it can help calm the sensory system or bring it up. And depending on what your child's needs are, you would, maybe look at the activities, and hopefully it will give you some ideas of things that might be helpful with what's going on with them. So, and one of my favorite things, and of course, being a teacher of young children, but children of all ages, I try to make everything I can be a game. Anything can be a game. Folding the laundry can be a game. Putting something in the wastebasket can be a game. And make it fun. Children learn through play. So you really want to make this like, this is your time, this is special time for you, and we're going to make it fun. So there are things like animal walking. If you can get one of the small, really small little trampolines that you can put in your home that you just kind of, jump on a little bit in the house, or a mattress or cushions on the floor, that gives the body movement, but also a sense of getting that proprioceptive touch and feeling to where your body is. Playing Simon Says is really great, or red light, green light for for really regulation, for kids learning to stop and go. And that can be difficult for a lot of kids and adults. So think about what that might help with. Also, it helps with listening. So really you're looking at trying to attend to the whole sensory system through the activities. Swings, a little rough and tumble play, may not be appropriate for the classroom, but might be okay for certain times at home. Deep pressure squishing or making a burrito with balls or pillows. There's all sorts of things that you can do that really can provide input to the body and help alert it or help bring it down if they're getting overexcited. Dancing to music, moving to a drum beat. I'm not going to read through all of this, but you'll be able to re-look at this and use whatever you want later on. But what you want to do is really look at what your child's needs are with their sensory processing system, and then try to incorporate breaks that could incorporate some of these things throughout the day. And I would probably, even for me, within a whole classroom, I've done breaks where we just stopped what we were doing, we took a break and we danced to music, or we're going to march around the classroom, or just different things that really can help a child take a break when they're getting squirmy, they're really, they've had too much sitting, they need to move around. All of these are great activities. Okay, for touch. These are some activities for those that are seekers or avoiders. I do want to let you know, one of my secrets as a teacher, and for one of my children at home who was not the seeker, who was avoidant, was to put some things in a plastic Ziploc bag. Because we have some children, I can remember I had a little gal when I was teaching that was very avoidant of anything, touching anything. She didn't like getting anything on her hands at all. So I would put shaving cream, finger paint, you name it, whatever the other kids were doing that she didn't want to do, you can adapt it and start with that, really. So, on one hand, you give the kids that are seeking an activity that's a break where they can, get things on their hands and get that tactile, information through their sensory system. Or then you have the ones that are avoidant, that you can still provide them an opportunity to start to explore. And I have to say with delight that by the end, of working with this little gal, she was finger painting, making all sorts of paintings for her mom and dad and taking them home, and painting with shaving cream, and really had learned that, maybe it wasn't quite so bad to touch some of the things that might have seemed quite unappealing prior to that. Visual, you can do you know, if you want to do something more sedentary, but their need to alert their visual system, you know, using flashlights, mazes with their finger, point and find objects in a picture book during a break, play I Spy. You know, another really good one, a lot of children I've worked with are very avoidant to look you straight in the eye. They might look from the side or they'll look down, but the face has a lot of, the human face has a lot of information that's coming from it. And sometimes it's a little overwhelming for children that might have a visual challenge with looking at directly. It might be a little overwhelming. So another game you can play is a game of staring, of trying to stare at each other, make it a game, and see how long you can stare at each other, and then kind of make it a game, giggle and stare back, be playful. I never force a child to do something they don't want to do unless it's, you know, something like bathrooming or something like that, that we really don't have a choice and they need to go, or we need to clean something up. But for the most part, it's make it a game and make it fun. Use lots of visual cues when you're working on sequencing, instructions, and daily routines, like a visual schedule. You know, keep your instructions brief, use as few words as possible, and work this into your daily routine. Taste and smell. What you want to do is provide, if you have a child that is a sensory seeker and constantly putting something in their mouth, you want to think about having specific toys, foods, different things that can really help satisfy what they are craving. Chew toys are absolutely great. I got a resource listed at the end of this, several that you can, you know, go online, and many of you may already be familiar with toys that kids can chew on that are safe, but it really can satisfy and give them not only, you know, the kind of that chewing sensation, first tasting, smelling what it tastes like, but also the proprioceptive input into their jaw. If they're looking at, you know, chewy foods, crunchy foods, hot foods, cold foods. Another one, many of the kids I've worked with over the years, including I have one myself who's a very picky eater, who now eats just about everything, but growing up ate almost nothing. And we did a lot of cooking with the kids in the program that I ran, and I really insisted on it because, and we worked with families on cooking at home, and it can be very simple recipes. And I find sometimes a child can get a lot of pleasure out of helping you cook something, even if they're not going to touch it themselves. They might enjoy watching you eat it. And eventually, it really does help them adapt and become less avoidant of trying something new, and making, you know, we try and make meal time or snack time enjoyable as much as possible. Recognize and identifying smells, and then recognize and identifying taste and texture. You can play all sorts of games with things like that, like guess what this is, or, you know, I think what you want to do is provide the experiences that your child might be either somewhat avoiding or craving to help them regulate their sensory system. Auditory and hearing. Worked with a lot of children that needed noise reduction headphones because the environment was too loud for them to really, they could not really, I guess, function well in an environment where it was overwhelming for them. And the noise reduction headphones really helped them function in many different environments successfully where they weren't able to prior to that. Using quiet mindfulness, you know, it's never too early to work with your child on sitting and listening and thinking, you know, especially if you can go outdoors and sit and like, what do you hear? You know, do we hear birds? Do we hear dog barking? You know, kind of quietly just listen. If they have favorite music or playlist, play that in the background if that helps calm them or helps bring their mood up. You know, so think about that, you know, how music can really be incorporated into their day. And if it's overwhelming for them, try and think about music, classical, slow music, or help them find something that they might enjoy. And see if you can help incorporate that into a break when they need to be a little more regulated. Listening to music during a favorite activity can be a lot of fun. If it's too distracting while they're doing schoolwork, or you really need them to concentrate on something, of course, that's not the time to do it. But you may want to experiment and see if it's helpful with their ability to attend and regulate and learn and communicate. And so you can do different types of music, soothing and calming, energizing, a specific beat. There's all sorts of things you can do that can be fun and really help your child with their auditory system and listening skills. Okay, so putting it all together, what we're going to want to do is there's kind of sketch out a sensory processing profile, or if you already have one, awesome. Create a visual chart of your child's schedule. If you try to think if you can, if you have specific days, if you could do a chart, that would be great. Choose activities that are going to address their sensory needs. Create a visual sensory activity menu that your child can point to and utilize, whether they're verbal or nonverbal, and then give them choices for activities during a sensory break. You may not want them to have 5 different choices, but certainly a choice between one activity or another. Always giving them a chance to make a decision and choose and have a little control can really help them feel good about what they're doing and their ability to problem solve and what will help them. And then the other thing you could do is put together a small sensory break box or basket that have some of the go-to items that you think really help your child calm, attend, stay regulated, whether it's something that might be a weighted blanket, something that if they are seeking oral input, something to chew on, something to fidget with if they're seeking tactile sensation. Think about what you could just keep in that basket as a go-to at home or as a teacher in a classroom that you can use to help children regulate. Last but not least, I just want to say that always remember that play is a child's work. This is how children learn and understand their world and that they live through play. And parents, you are always the child's first teacher, and you know your child better than anyone. So please never forget that the most effective asset you have in your parent toolbox is you. And as I would say to my staff and other families that I've worked with, is use your affect. You can never use enough. Just remember, when you are wanting to bring a situation down or bring it up, choosing your affect to appropriately attend to that. Okay, here are some resources. Don't worry about trying to copy them down. I am going to provide them. We're going to post this on our website. The webinar will be available, I believe, to rewatch if you want at a later time. And I really hope that you have found the presentation today helpful. And I'll look forward to answering any questions that you might have. Thank you.
I have to unmute myself. Wait.
Hey, Monica.
Hi. I'll go ahead and unmute myself now. Okay, so I had a question.
Yes.
Are there any good resources where there's like a checklist where you can You know what, where you can actually find.
Yes. Are you talking about a checklist to kind of think about where your child's at?
Yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I actually have a checklist that is, I provided a link to at the end of the webinar, and it really gives a nice rundown, and it gives you an opportunity to check off where you think your child is, whether they are underreactive, overreactive, mixed, or neutral for each different area of the senses and different activities that you can think about. And really, it gives you a good sense once you go through that to really start to think about where your child's at for their sensory processing system.
Yeah, Beckett has been diagnosed with sensory processing disorder. And I remember when he was littler, he wouldn't even walk on the grass barefooted. And I guess, it's hard. Well, for me, I'm speaking as a parent now, and I'm sure other parents out there, we used to have to, you kind of have that parent guilt because we had to force him to kind of go on the grass.
Right.
And
right.
even though they wanted to fight you, but eventually he finally
decided it was okay.
Yeah. So it's
really challenging. You can have them at either extreme, and I would say leave the parent guilt behind. I know how you feel because I had one who was a total avoidant. The other one was the opposite and a total seeker in every way, shape, or form. And so there was no happy medium. And so I would say, Beckett sounds clearly like he was avoidant. And maybe sensitive about how the feel on his feet was going to be for walking on the grass. And so that just gives you a clue in that where his sensory system is at, because even though his threshold for pain might be super high and he might not register it, yet here he is, really sensitive to having anything that's ticklish on his feet. So you can see for any child, what happens is when you have that situation, they can become very upset quickly because they don't want to do it. It's upsetting. And so I think helping them learn to adapt to new environments is what we need to do as parents. And when you have a sensory system that is really challenging for you, it's really hard to live in the world as it is without having, either being a seeker or being really avoidant.
Yeah, I think, and also another challenge is even, it's funny because I taught for 23 years myself, but I didn't really understand sensory processing in the classroom until after I had a child with special needs. And then I learned I needed a sensory basket for those kiddos that, had the autism, characteristics of always needing to touch something, or they needed to stand. A lot of them wouldn't sit. So, yeah, I think this is great because I think as parents in the moment, you get, I think you're right. It's very hard to even regulate yourself as a parent sometimes. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Don't let me fool you. And luckily my children are not, they're adults. Hopefully they're not going to be calling me on the phone like, Mom, you are not always regulated. That is the truth. It's impossible. We are all human beings and it's impossible to stay regulated. And yes, did I ever lose my temper and yell at my children when they were annoying me? Yes, I did. But you learn more about what's going on. You learn more about what's going on with them and how you can help them. And then, you learn how to help yourself. I mean, I think with the sensory system stuff, like I never really gave it a ton of thought until I was learning and really seeing it in the kids that I was working with and how it really was impeding their development and their ability to learn. And we really had to address those underlying issues. And then I was like, felt a little bad because I didn't know all that when my kids were little, but my hope now is that I can share information and let parents, say, this is information I didn't have, or I only had some of it. And now maybe there's some ways I can help my child. And frankly, yourself. I worked with a lot of families where even the parent was like, that's why I like to sleep with 5 blankets, or, weight, or whatever.
I have a weighted blanket.
And they never realized it. And you think about, even, in a meeting where you're super bored, we think about kids stemming or whatever, that's just them activating their sensory system. And, they become more socially appropriate as they get older. But, even in a meeting when I'm bored and thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to fall asleep, I might be tapping my pencil, I might be swinging my foot under the table. There's all sorts of little tricks that we're doing as adults that are socially appropriate that keep you regulated and able to pay attention during a meeting or whatever you're doing, especially when it's boring or something, not something you're that interested in. It takes a lot to keep yourself in the moment.
No, I know. Well, you know what I find about even our little SYNGAP kids, and Nabrina, I know you probably can share a little bit about this as well. Is I find that, as I know Beck, he's 12 now, so we're moving into the preteen stage. But when he was little, it was our kids are very they love running water. But yet it seems like it changes all the time. Right. It's like you're always on your toes because you have no idea what's going to set them off.
Right.
Yeah. Did you experience that, Nabrina?
And
Marjana?
That's part of it, moving through different developmental stages, but also being mixed reactivity.
Yeah.
Which is the surprise. You never know what you're going to get. What do you think, Nabrina? Is she muted or is she on?
Did I hold
there
on.
There we go. You know what? I do believe Empress Ray is very mixed, or maybe underactive, because sometimes you can't get her to move and you're like, come on, girl. And then you realize that, that's just where she is most comfortable or feels the safest. Not real sure which it is. So, but I did have a question.
Sure.
At the very beginning when you were going over the different types.
Yes.
But I've always wondered, and when I look at my own daughter, I think, wow, I don't know. How do you know for sure, and maybe there's no for sure, is it too much or too overwhelming? Is it a sensory issue? Or is it just willful, whatever, disobedience, willful disobedience?
I think what I look at is patterns of behavior. And when you're if you look at it as willful disobedience, and I think that's what many teachers I've worked with over the years, and what I might have thought years ago, and thinking, oh, this child just is refusing to do something. What I would do is kind of sit back and assess the situation. Is this something that is a pattern of behavior, and is it centered around something that she's avoiding doing? And is there any type of reason that would be a reason that she would be avoiding doing it? Is it too hard? Is what you're asking her to do, is it overwhelming? Does it feel too difficult for her? Is this happening in certain environments and not in others? Because I think what we try and look at, because I come from a developmental teaching background, where is looking at the areas where they are developmentally, and then looking at the sensory processing system, what's working well for them, what isn't, and then what's the situation that you're in. Is there this situation that, like, you want her to get up and go to school? Frequently for most. Yes, you're going to have many children that are willfully going to stay in bed, but also, looking at what are the things we can do strategy-wise to help them transition from one activity to a next? Or do you want to give me an example of where you're stuck? Or
you know what? I can't really think of anything in particular because of course, because I'm trying to think of something in particular.
That's okay.
I do feel like I may have to overcome some of what I was thinking of as disobedience. I probably was really quick to say, hey, get over it. And maybe not that sensitive to what might be going on in her head or heart. So, because I was really quick to say, hey, get over that. You know, you can't have that particular shirt every day or whatever it is. So, which is one of those moments you look back and think, I could have been a little kinder there. So,
well, I think as parents,
I'm sorry, go ahead. I was going to go, I feel ya.
I know, because you just think, oh, get over that. So.
Yeah. And I think it's just trying to, if you can, reflect on what's going on, and you know, if she's able to communicate to you verbally, or you know, using gestures, you know, or how is she conveying to you that she doesn't want to do something besides maybe protest or just refusal to move.
Refusal to move is what ours is, right?
And I think, you know, the strategies I would be looking at are, you know, if it's for a transition from just not moving to doing something else, is giving her a heads up and really getting down at her level in front of her and saying, hey, guess what? I know you're really comfortable here, but we need to do this. And, you know, and sometimes as a parent, you know, we don't always have the luxury and forethought to be, you know, in that
give the heads up, right?
You know, transition them in a nice manner that would be, you know, meet their
timely.
Right. I know. Please hurry, would you? Right.
And it's just one of those things that I think, you know, I think you brought up a great point in terms of the behavior. It's just being mindful about when your child is having a difficult time or not obeying, or, you know, going along with the program that you would like them to do, that maybe there's something else going on that you can really kind of think about, and what can you do, what strategies can you build in to kind of help them be more successul.
Right, okay.
Yeah, it's the art of distraction. That's what I've learned.
Right.
And when Beckett learned bribery, that was another thing.
Yeah. There's no, you know, I mean, I wish I could say, you know, this is going to solve every problem for every child. You know, it takes time, and every child is a puzzle, you know, because you know, when you're looking at the sensory system, of course it changes over time, and what may have bothered them when they are younger is changing as they get older, or, you know, they might be underreactive one day and maybe they're not feeling well and they're overreactive in another situation, and just trying to take into account what you think might be going on. But it doesn't give a pass to poor behavior all the time.
Right.
You don't want to give a pass and say, well, all poor behavior, because, you know, I think children need to know that we have expectations for them, and, you know, boundaries that are healthy. You know, we aren't going to hurt ourselves. We're not going to hurt someone else. Those type of healthy boundaries, and that we're there to help them stay safe.
Right.
Well, I think this was good. These are good tips, and I think it's good. You know, I'm excited about this series too. I know, Leslie, you just threw this together. I mean, I shouldn't say you threw it together. You had this together, but you did it on such short notice, and I appreciate this so much. And I think it's a great resource, I think, for everybody just to look at. So I think, oh, wow, we were almost an hour.
Wow.
The top of the hour.
We did.
So we did, yes. No, well, I this week, on video and on the website. So super excited. Nabrina, thank you for putting all this together.
You're welcome. Sure.
Thank you, Nabrina.
And then all the other people that got on, and we appreciate it. And we have some more coming up. So some more.
Yes, we do.
We have some really good. I think we have a good lineup. So.
Terrific.
Right.
Well, thank you, Monica, and
Thank
you for
you.
having me today. It was good to see everyone.
Yes, it's great to see you, Nabrina. Thank you.
Bye.
Okay,
Okay,
take care.
bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks.